thank you all for coming. I have to say this is a splendid turnout, and quite rightly so, as John's photography is very worthy of your interest and ours. Dunoon Burgh Hall's motto has long been bringing the unexpected to Dunoon, and which we've been doing pretty much for some years now, with several past exhibitions, many of them having a rock and roll connection, such as Robert Mapplethorpe, Andy Warhol. There's rock and roll in the background of them, and much is so with this one. John was in the drummer in the Buzzcocks, who I'm sure most of you will remember, from 76 to 81, I've got that right, as a drafted in as a tender lad at 16.
Yep.
But now relocated to the Isle of Harris since 2002, and
yep.
as with his drumming, he is pretty much, as a photographer, self-taught. And I tend to think that when you haven't studied it as such or been trained as such, when you teach yourself in any subject, you find a different a different approach. You may not be bogged down with the traditional approach to what you do. And I think that kind of comes through in John's photography. He's found a way of photographing and doing justice to the subject matter that maybe other more hidebound photographers wouldn't do. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but maybe not.
The amateurism shows through me.
It's kind of like the light. No, I think the light pours out of you, but that's a different musician. And this exhibition is brought to us not just by John, but by Street Level Photoworks, and Malcolm Dixon is here with us tonight. We, generally speaking, have one exhibition a year from them, and we have a very fruitful ongoing relationship, so we're looking forward to the next one. But today and until 4th of September, we've got John Maher's Nobody's Home. Over to you, John.
All right, I feel guilty, like I can't see what is this going to be safe?
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, thanks for coming. It's a great turnout, and it's also Street Level have taken care of getting the prints done for this, and I'll admit that I didn't see these actual prints until this morning, so there was a little thing in the back of my mind thinking, what if I turn up and they're dreadful? I can't remember the name of the people in Glasgow who printed them, but they've done an absolutely fantastic job. They've turned out exactly as I'd wanted. So what you're seeing is a faithful representation of the images that I took. Now the exhibition Nobody's Home, these pictures were originally, well, not all of these pictures, many of them were originally exhibited back in 2013, and they've occasionally done the rounds, and they've been sort of stashed away in my workshop in Leverburgh-on-Harris for quite a while, and then this opportunity to do the thing here at Dunoon cropped up, so I also took the opportunity to put in a few extras, personal favourites of mine that have come along after they were first exhibited. So I'll give you, guess a little bit of have you got a string of questions that you want to ask me? Or?
No, I'm hoping to get questions from the gathering from the audience.
Right.
They all look very keen and full of glances and full of questions.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm sure.
Well, I'll give a bit of background to how they came about, I suppose. I first got into going around photographing Harris about 7 years after I'd actually lived there, because it took me that long to figure out a way of taking photographs of the place in a way that interested me, in a way that maybe I haven't seen someone do it before. And I'd always been attracted to sort of decaying things in the landscape as opposed to going out and taking a picture of the amazing beaches that we've got in Harris. And it was seeing an American photographer in a TV documentary, a guy called Troy Paver. He was taking pictures of decaying bits and pieces like trashed American diners, old 50s cars in the desert. And at night, and during these long exposure images, he was using additional light he was putting into the shot. I didn't understand how he was doing it, but I thought the images were fantastic. So I then sort of, right, I've got to get the camera out and figure out how to do like a Hebridean version of that. So that resulted in me going out sort of within 2 or 3 days of a full moon to get that quality of light that's only available at that time of year. And of course Harris is a great place to do that because there's most of Harris, there's zero light pollution. So there are a number of pictures on here that from that period, for going that the one of the I'm supposed to mention ones that are on this list because we can drag them up on screen. But I'll just mention the one with the boat over there. That's sort of about 1 o'clock in the morning, and it's a long exposure with light that I've added in. And that introduced me to this whole new technique of long exposure photography and adding in additional light. But it did become quite a frustrating process because as hooked as I was on it, the opportunities to go out and do that kind of photography were very limited because you were dependent on it being a full moon or a day or two either side of a full moon. It had to be in the winter months, because in the summer up in Harris it just doesn't get dark enough for the moonlight to really do its thing. And it just so happened that one night when I was out and about, I ventured into one of the houses I was photographing, and I noticed, shining my torch around, that there were loads of personal possessions left in the house. And I thought, well, I'm going to come back in the daylight hours and have a proper look at this. And that was the beginning of my obsession with then travelling around the islands, looking for houses like that basically had been left empty for years and years. But in many instances, the people who had left, maybe they'd died or they'd moved away. For some reason, they had left a lot of things behind. And it was that sort of, although it was this thing about the people had gone, but it's almost like the presence of the people was still in the house. So the first one they can call up is one called Blue Chair. Apparently the people watching the live stream will be able to see that now, and you'll be able to see it on the wall over there later. It's a house in Harris that was hardly visible from the road, just tucked out of sight, but sort of spotted, driving around one day, spotted the just top of a roof, and then went to investigate, and then went into this room, and there was this amazing, probably 60s era blue chair in front of an open fireplace, and between the fireplace and the chair was a 1-bar electric fire. There were loads of ornaments on the mantelpiece, and there was a 1997 calendar on the wall. There was a packet of rich tea biscuits. The biscuits had long disintegrated in a biscuit tin. Loads of like that. The cupboard in the corner that my parents used to keep all the fancy stuff in that would only come out when the relatives came round at Christmas or New Year. They had one of those cupboards in there. And I just found it absolutely fascinating. And so it became like an addiction of going around Harris initially, because I live in Harris, so it was relatively easy to travel around. And then I started going further afield up into Lewis. And then when the notion of actually exhibiting these came about, I thought, well, I'd always been using this sort of tagline of an alternative view of the Outer Hebrides, because I felt that I was presenting things to people about the Hebrides that you didn't normally see, cue the landscapes and the beaches and the sunsets and so on. But I wanted it to be an inclusive term, so I thought, well, I've got to include the Uists as well. So I ended up going down to North Uist and Benbecula and South Uist and Barra, and ultimately Battersea is an image I'll get onto later in a bid to try and cover this particular topic. And so initially I was taking these pictures just because I had gotten into photography and I wanted to pursue a particular thing, and I totally got into this. Had no intention of them never even thought about them becoming an exhibition. But they seemed to, they caught the imagination of a certain area of the media, and when it went on tour, people responded to them really well. And you know, we're 9 years on now, and we're still, I don't know, it's like I'm in a one-hit wonder. It keeps coming back. Hopefully in 10 years' time, I'll be back showing a different batch of pictures that everybody will really like as well. Moving on to the next one for the live stream people is one called Green Room. And this is actually, it's a house in North Uist that I'd spotted, again, way off the road. You couldn't actually drive to this house, so it was a case of parking up and walking across boggy stuff, climbing over barbed wire fences and stuff to get access to it. Turns out that the house probably explains one of the reasons why the thing had been abandoned. The guy in it had died, and the original access to the house was by boat. So, you know, even if it was fit for renovation, it was never, in today's, you know, it's not going to happen today. So it was just left. And in that image, there's, I can do it from memory, there's a sheep carcass. Obviously, one of the doors gaining access to the house had caved in. Sheep were able to wander in. Sheep had come in there, decided to die on top of a pile of 12-inch records. There was it was mostly Scottish pipe bands, if that makes it any better.
Everyone's a critic.
That's kind of a gesture, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but that particular room also had what many of the houses have as well, is the old Rayburn stove, which was kind of like the heart of many Hebridean homes. I know a lot of certainly when I exhibited these down in Cumbria, I could hear people whenever they mentioned it, they were always mentioning the word Arga, which kind of found really annoying, and I had to resist the urge. It's not a bloody Arga, it's a Rayburn. And there is apparently some of if the people were feeling a bit more well-to-do, the next notch up from a Rayburn was a stove called the Modern Mistress. And there is one right down the end of the room on this wall. There's a house with a Modern Mistress, which
I have to say, when I was putting up the labels, I was going through a list, so I had all the labels provided by Street Level. Modern Mistress.
Yeah, some of this stuff sounds a bit weird, but you know, you can actually read I checked before. Yeah. You can read the logo. It's cast into
Where would that date from? Would that be like
the Modern Mistress?
30s?
I'm not sure when that stove would have originally been bought. Certainly, I don't know if it would probably not that early. I reckon no, probably 50s, 60s. And the thing is, those things lasted for ages. And then, as the pictures got more well known, and then, well, one of my, when I say favourite, I mean it in an ironic way. There was a whole bunch of them were shared on the Daily Mail online website, and the hilarious thing was the stream of comments that followed below. There was like I haven't checked it in years, but it was like 295 comments, and a lot of them were just moronic, as you'd expect. But you know, saying it's an absolute crime that these houses have been left to rot and so on. But the thing is that many of the houses that I've photographed, they even with the best will in the world, they wouldn't be fit for somebody to try and renovate. They wouldn't be up to it. You know, they might be built on literally on a bog or over a stream. And there's one in particular. It's not the Green Room. It's the one I mentioned first, the blue chair. That house. When I first went into it, the ceiling was actually consisted of wallpaper on top of sheets of hardboard, and one of the sheets of hardboard had actually dropped down, and I actually moved that one out of the way because it was blocking, you know, part of what I wanted to photograph. And when you actually then looked up in the gap where the hardboard had fallen down, you could see the corrugated tin roof And then, of course, bits of that had rotted through, and you could literally see through to the sky. So you just think that the people who lived in those houses, particularly in the winter months, must have been absolutely freezing. So this thing of having the Rayburn stove was, that would be getting piled up with peats. They'd be burning peats all the time to try and heat the place. They'd do their cooking on the Rayburn. We mentioned this earlier this morning. We was chatting to someone. You know, if there was an orphaned lamb and it needed warming up, the Rayburn's got a little thing, drop down thing where you pop the lamb in there for 5 minutes to warm it up. Or if you'd been out in the soaking rain, got soaked, you put your boots in there to dry them out. You know, the Rayburn was literally the heart of the home.
Presumably a bit longer if you wanted to eat the lamb.
Yeah, a few vegetarians on Harris now.
Yeah, well, apologies to any vegans in the audience.
Yeah. So for the next image, it's called Bedroom and Chapel, and that'll probably pop up on screen shortly. And this is a little bit different to most of the houses that are photographed, because it's quite a grand house that dates back to the 1800s, and it was something to do with a factor who, you know, chased people off the land, you know, off the west side of Harris to put sheep on it, and they put the poor peasants over on the rocky east side, where I now live. And this is on an uninhabited island in the Sound of Harris. It's about a mile off the south end of Harris, an island called Ensay, and the house is called Ensay House. And I got the opportunity to go over there one day and get inside, and you can see on the left-hand side of the wall there's like a bell thing that you would ring to summon the servants, because there was servants' quarters in that house. But the thing that attracted me to taking that particular image was the idea of got these amazing old, probably be very expensive doors nowadays, and so I deliberately jammed the door open because it was tending to come back on me with a bit of junk I found on the floor. So it's this sense of looking into the room, but at the same time looking out of it as well through the window to what is a small chapel you can see through the window. And the little chapel there is, there's a group of people, they call themselves the Friends of Ensay, and what they do, they organise a trip out to Ensay each year with a minister, and they hold a service in there, and it's a thing that makes it possible for their little chapel to be officially recognised as a religious venue, or I don't know what the correct terminology of that is.
Grail, or sort of, you know, a religious ceremony, perhaps coming out to the chapel. I mean, it's sort of intercede. It's very painterly. I'm very captivated by how the graininess and how much it looks.
Yeah, well, that is another thing that I suppose, lots of things that appeal to me about taking the pictures in the first place. I suppose, firstly, it was that thing of it finding so many personal belongings left behind. Because, like I said to you earlier, you know, I'm a lad from Manchester. If a place got left abandoned for like half an hour, it'd be gone or trashed. Whereas these have been, a majority of these have been empty for probably, you know, decades. And the only thing that's caused any damage is that nature is taking its toll on them. I mean, ultimately what happens is when it gets as bad as once the roof gives way, of course it comes in and it trashes everything. So I think I was fortunate in that funny way of putting it, I suppose, but I think I've managed to capture them. I was just lucky enough to capture them at the right time. There's a certain amount of decay has taken place over a period of time, yet it's not so drastic that it's completely ruined it, because some of these now were taken, you know, getting on for 10 years ago, and some of the houses that you see on the walls here now don't exist anymore. They've either literally fallen to bits, or in some cases been demolished to make way for a new build. So there's always also that, I suppose it's quite a nice element that they've been documented, you know.
I mean, they look as if you've just gone in there and photographed them as they are. I've been looking quite carefully for signs of composition and maybe thinking that you've, moved things around a bit, but I don't think you probably have. Or
no,
if you have, very little.
I do get asked that, because some people are really suspicious that that's been completely manipulated. Now, there's in the vast majority of instances, they're literally, as you say, you turn up, I see what you see in front of you, and then it's just a case of me composing the image to frame it in a way that I feel suits it best. There was the one with the blue chair in that I mentioned earlier. The sheet of hardboard had fallen down and it was draped on top of the cabinet full of ornaments. So I did drag that out of the way. And then there's another one in. I haven't asked John to call this one up, but I call it The Dog, the Cat and the Bird. And the title came to me when I was looking at the image on the computer, because there's that picture's further down the wall there. Again, it's another, looking straight on, yet another Rayburn stove. And then on the mantelpiece above, there's a picture of a dog. And it's one of those, I suppose, again, this is part of the thing why these things appeal to me. It's a really tacky looking picture. It's about this big, and it's like a blown plastic, so it's almost three-dimensional. I don't know if you're old enough to remember. Yeah, I remember going down looking for a birthday present for my mum. I was about 10 or 11 and I had a bit of pocket money. I thought I'd buy my mum a birthday present and go down the road to the local hardware shop, and they had some of these 3D pictures in the window, and I thought they were the most amazing thing I had ever seen. I didn't have enough money to buy it, but I do still remember it. And of course I go in this house and there's this, it's like a lassie, looks like Lassie. There's that dog on the mantelpiece in this 3D plastic thing. And then on the opposite side of the mantelpiece, there's one of a kitten, the same thing. And there's a dog and a cat. And then the weird thing is that I was setting up to get the picture, and I didn't position them, that's where they were. In fact, the cat's on the left and the dog's on the right. So if I'd been into fiddling, I would have put the dog on the left, so it would be the dog. Right. But when I was setting up to take the picture, the house had been, like most of these, have been empty for quite some time. And I was setting up the tripod and jiggling the position. And I noticed there was a little skeleton of a bird about this big on the floor, right at the foot of the tripod. So I'm looking through the viewfinder and I'm hoping I could get the bird in the shot as well, but it wasn't. But I cheated, and I gave it a little flick with my foot, and it slid in towards the Rayburn. And it's either, if you look at the shot carefully, you will see the little bird. So it gave me the dog, the cat and the bird.
You can put that under artistic license.
Yes. But also, that one in particular, it does look I'll admit it does look a bit set up. It's like this scene of decay. You've got the tacky picture of the dog and the cat, the little dead birds on the floor. There's a wooden spoon on the wall that says, written on it, "You're never too old to spoon." And there's also a framed picture propped up on the mantelpiece in the middle, in between the dog and the cat. And it's a picture of a boat, and we know that the guy that used to live in the house was he was in the Navy. He was a merchant seaman or whatever. So hence the picture of the boat, I guess. But it must have been left for some time with in the sunlight with something draped over it, because half of it was faded and half of it wasn't. And then there's also this really quite fancy green bowl, like when you watch them cowboy movies and they have a basin and a big bowl to put water in. It's like one of those things, and it did look a bit set up. And then I discovered about a week before I took my picture, there'd been a group of French photography students staying at a bunkhouse just up the road, and they had been spotted going into this house, and I guess they had done a little bit of manoeuvring around, but I guess I took advantage of what they'd done. And also, in amongst all the detritus and decay, Also propped up on the mantelpiece was a copy of Good Housekeeping magazine from 1989.
Yeah, not evident in most of these photographs, but
so there's the next one for the screen is called TV Set, which is right beside me here. And this is a house on Scalpy, Isle of Scalpy, which you can now access by, it's just a little drive over a bridge to get to Scalpy. And it was actually a friend of mine who when we did the first ever exhibition of some of these images, it was a joint exhibition with a guy called Ian Patterson. And Ian, he was sharing his pictures with me because he got in touch and said, I've been doing similar stuff to you. And he sent me a picture. He'd been in this house and very similar looking pictures of this. And I was really, I think it's the TV that sold it to me for some reason. I said, you've got to tell me where that is because I'm going to go and do my version of that. So of course I head off to Scalpy and I take that picture, which this just looks to me like there's been an atom bomb test. And whoever was sat in that chair watching the TV got vaporised except for one boot. And then probably it was a few months after this I'd taken this picture, I got a phone call from someone I know on Harris who said, I've just seen something that might interest you. It looks up your street. There's an old television set been dumped on the pavement outside the Harris Hotel in Tarbert. So, of course, I went to have a look, and it was still there on the pavement. And I thought, well, it's a shame to see it getting junked, you know. It's clearly not going to work, but I'll take it back down the workshop and just keep hold of it for now, figure out something at some point. And it was only when later in the day I was looking at the telly back down at work, and I thought, I hadn't clicked at first that it might be this TV set. So I opened up the images I'd taken and blew them up and so on and zoomed in and checked the telly. It's actually the TV. Someone's taken this TV set out of this house, which really annoyed me because I hate the idea of like, you know, the whole thing is you go in and all I'm doing, I'm taking pictures, I'm not taking anything else out of the house, and I don't think anybody else should either. But coincidentally, it might have been about a year later, I got a call from a producer who was working on what was going to be a TV programme on BBC Alapa about corrugated tin houses. And they'd done a bit of, Googling or whatever, and they found I'd photographed stuff like that. And they asked me, could I nominate a house and go along and we'll do a little piece about it. And I came up with this genius idea that this would be my opportunity to reunite this television set back to where it belongs. So that became like a little sort of 5-10 minute thing in the programme about bringing the TV, and the guy who was presenting the programme, there's footage of me and him carting it back in and putting it back in there. And then skip forward another few months, and then I'm on the thing called the Butty Bus, which is like a mobile cafe, and it's just across the road from my workshop. And there was a guy on there that I knew with another fella, and he says, have you ever met Finlay before? And I says, no. So he introduced me to him, and he said Finlay is he was a relation, a nephew I think, of the woman who used to live in this house. And I said, wow, we just did a TV, did you see the thing on TV, where we brought the telly back and all that? And he says, no. So I spent about the next 5 minutes telling him the long convoluted story about how the TV programme came about, and that, wasn't I great for bringing this television set back and reuniting it where it belonged? And he just let me waffle on, and then eventually he said, that's really strange. My auntie never had electricity. I have no idea. I think it was to impress the neighbours.
It's probably because people had better imaginations in those days. So look at it. I mean, I do the same with the radio. I prefer the radio because the pictures are better.
But then it went a little bit further because I posted this on my website and probably social media sort of thing. And it's shortly afterwards I got a phone call from somebody that I think it was the Daily Telegraph, and he'd obviously been doing his lazy investigative journalism via Google, and there'd been a report issued that the they were stating the number of people in the UK that still had a black and white TV licence, and that the highest proportion was in the Outer Hebrides. So he must have put TV set Outer Hebrides, and then he found my photo and then rings me, and he wanted me to put him onto someone that would still watch black and white TV. So I thought, I thought, I asked around. I asked around. And then somebody told me, he says, that's absolute nonsense. They might have a black and white TV licence, but they ain't got a black and white TV. Because it saves you over £100.
Frankly, I was surprised I had a TV licence, because you'd see the van coming, wouldn't you?
Well, then somebody then told me that, of course, when they used to send those the vans with all the contraptions on the top that were going to come and get you if you. They board the ferry at Ullapool or in Skye. Someone on the ferry straight away is on the Bush Telegraph. They come in.
Hide them.
Yeah.
Well,
so that probably got loaned around loads of houses in Harris. Yeah, we've got black and white TV. They're not daft. Right, so there's 5 images we've got here to call up for the live streamers, and the last one is taken in Uy, little village, UIDH. I think Uy is how you pronounce it. It's in Vatersay, and Vatersay is the southernmost inhabited island in the Outer Hebrides. It's connected via a short causeway to Barra. And again, another name check for Ian Patterson, who we did the original exhibition with. The first ever contact I had with Ian was, he said, I've seen your pictures, really like them. I like to come over. He's from Fife. I like to come over to the Outer Hebrides when I can, and he's into very similar sort of pictures. And he'd taken a picture of these 2 gable ends in Uy, in Vatersay, and said, I think this would really suit your treatment. So I've been keeping it in mind since I first had contact with Ian. And then in 2017, I was over in Barra, and I thought, right, I'm in Barra, I'm going to search out this place, these 2 gable ends in Vatersay. And so I went down and found it, and I had this little concept of how to do it, because I've used additional light in that shot. Earlier that day, I'd been in the main town in Castle Bay in Barra, and one of the buildings that I'd been on a job to photograph was the big church there, big Catholic church. So I'd gone in the church, and on the side, just of the entrance where you go, they had copies of the Catholic newspaper, and the picture on the front page was a photograph of a hearse with a coffin inside on the beach at Barra, because many of you probably know the airport at Barra, the plane comes in. It's a spectacular looking thing. The plane comes in and lands on the beach. And of course what had happened, I think I was there in June 2017. Earlier that year, a few months earlier, there'd been the Manchester Arena bombing, and a 15-year-old girl from Barra had been at the concert, and she was killed in that explosion. And this picture of the coffin in the hearse was her. She'd been returned to Barra that very week, and so you got this. It's a bit. So she got killed in Manchester, and then I was in Barra, where she was from, and then I was presented with this place of, putting the lights back on in that house. So I'm going to stop on that one there. That's why that's a personal favourite for me, because it brings back a lot of that thing. So I don't know how long I can tell more about the images, or I don't know whether you want to get into Q&A.
We'd like to about the exhibition. So perhaps anyone got any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Certainly, yeah.
Sorry. I was just wondering if you, obviously you touched on it a little bit, because you would find out
the story behind the people that lived in these abandoned houses. Did you find out most of them, or did you?
Right.
Did you want to, or did you want them just left as kind of to speak for themselves?
Right. I tried to find out any information in advance. I just wanted to go out and very sort of a bit stealth-like go in and get these photographs. But then as they became more known, there were people actually were getting in contact that had, they knew about the house, or their relations used to own it, whatever. So I did get to hear stories about many of these, or if I've already shared some stories about them, I mean, I got to hear about them after the fact. There's one, it's this one right here actually, this house. I'd taken a number of photographs in that house, and I'd shared them. I've written a thing up about it, and I featured them on my website. And I think I'd posted them up on a Saturday night. And Monday morning there was a phone call, and it was this woman asking to speak to me. So she explained that her sister had seen the pictures, and she'd got on and told her to go and check them out. And it turns out, I can't remember the exact relationship, I think it was their grandparents' house. And she started off by saying that she found the images quite upsetting. So I offered to pull them off, and while I was saying that, I was also thinking, like, I hope she doesn't, because I like them. And then she says, no, I don't want you to take them off. It's just I'll tell you why I find them upsetting. And then she went on to explain, the stuff about the house, and it's a weird one where when the people who were living in it had died, the house had got left to the eldest in the family. In other words, I think it was her older sister, and the eldest. That's the traditional thing to do. But she wasn't living on the island anymore. She was. I'm not sure if she was abroad or maybe certainly on the mainland at least, with the intention of one day coming back and doing something with the house. But of course the intention often never comes about, and the house just sits there. But I suppose the awkward thing about this was that there were relatives from the family still on the island witnessing the gradual decay of this place turning into nothing. And it actually, to the point that it caused a bit of a rift in the family, and so you can see why there was upset. And it taught me a kind of a lesson, I think, in that I like to think that it'd be very easy to say that actually going into these houses, I should say I've never broken into one. It's only because the access you could just go in through the door, it's not a problem. But it is kind of, I guess, a voyeuristic sort of thing to do, photographing people's personal belongings, even if they're long dead. But trying to do it in a respectful way, which is difficult to, I don't know if that comes, how can you convey that in the pictures, but hopefully that does come across, because that was the intention behind them.
Also, you've captured them before they were to decay. You can still see when that had been lived in. You can imagine, like a paint here. Of course, a lot of them, within a few years, the roof's gone, and as you say, everything's gone once the rain comes in.
Yeah, and there's one down the back there. It's called I called it waiting room. It's also been a bit of a history lesson of the islands for me as well, because not only have I learned more about the islands as a result of taking the pictures and then hearing direct stories from people associated with these buildings, but you get to see, in a way, it's a little bit like a glimpse into the way fashions in interior design have gone on the island, because there's some of the kind of still the basic ones that have got the wooden V lining, the one called the green room that was flagged up earlier, and there's one with a clock on a brightly coloured yellow wall. I've got to mention something about the colours of the interiors as well, because many of the houses outwardly actually look quite dour, a bit drab. It's because these things have to withstand horrendous weather conditions, so the priority is not to make it look like some designer thing on the outside. It has to withstand the weather, so you've got that, the harling on the outside and all that kind of thing. But it really surprised me when I first went into one. I was presented with this room that was like a lemon yellow walls, and it matched the Rayburn. The Rayburn was a yellow one, and then there's the two pictures down on the end wall, they're both taken in the same house. Now you see the door, the Rayburn is like a baby blue colour, and they've painted the door in kind of like a baby blue as well. So it's like there's some thought gone into it. But the other mad thing about that, I thought, and it was only pointed out to me by someone who came along to an exhibition, I hadn't even realised it, weirdly at first, that that house has been wallpapered, and the wallpaper is wood effect wallpaper, and because it's been on so long it's starting to peel away, and you can clearly see underneath the wood effect wallpaper is wood. The real thing. It's weird. And there's one house, it's not featured in here, it was just down the road from our house, and a similar thing, it's the wooden V lining. But at some point, it must have become fashionable. I'm guessing it must have been around about the mid-60s that it became fashionable to not just have your V-lining. It was much cooler and hipper to have wallpaper. So, but what many of them did was, rather than wallpaper directly onto the wood, they would first of all get old newspapers and paste them on as like an lining paper. And of course, a lot of the wallpaper had peeled off. And I found myself in there for like a good couple of hours reading bits of the newspapers, and there was a couple of newspapers on there that I'd never even heard of before. I can't remember the name of them now, but long gone. And of course the dates are on the wallpaper, so that presumably, unless they were into hoarding old newspapers, that their spate of decorating took place in between 64 and 66.
Anybody else?
When you go into a place like that, are you sensitive to the atmosphere?
Just let them with the mic.
Hi. Have you got any urge to go to other islands and do more photography of deserted, abandoned buildings, or even parts of the mainland?
I have no, not really. I mean, as a result of having done these, of course, I thought I'd stumbled across something really unique. But then, as more people got to see them, there's, I can't remember the name of the photographer, but there was a guy in Southern Ireland that had got a whole collection of pictures very in a similar vein to this, and but his had something that is completely missing from these, and that's a lot of Catholic imagery, which I'm of Southern Irish descent. Both parents were born in Southern Ireland, Roman Catholics. I was brought up as that, and we had in our we didn't call it the living room back then. It was the middle room. We had a picture of Jesus with this weird bulb. I think they used the same picture. I've seen it in Father Ted, that Catholic stuff. So I realised that it's not unique, but I think it's probably specific to rural areas, because if it was more city type, all the stuff would get taken away, nicked or trashed or whatever. So and then somebody did a radio interview a few years ago with somebody for a radio station in Atlanta. And then he showed me a bunch of images of where people have gone round photographing old abandoned houses round there. So that's like the Southern American version. So no, I think I feel I have an attachment with these just by virtue of living there, and I feel like I've got a little bit of inside knowledge to it. Whereas I think if I went to another country doing it, I'd feel like a bit of a tourist, and I don't want these to look like tourist images, if that makes any sense. Just get the microphone.
Oh, these are not just time exposures, are they? I mean, there's a lot of artistic lighting taking place there.
Yeah, many of the shots have got additional lighting in. I mean, some of it's fairly obvious, particularly the night photography stuff. And the one I mentioned there about the two gable ends, where I've lit that in such a way as to make it look like the lights were on inside a house that basically no longer exists. But there are several, because there was a bunch of these images that I actually shot on a large format film camera, because, well, there's a sort of long technical reason for that. It's basically because I wanted to create really large prints of like really high quality. And all of those are shot just literally with the natural daylight. It's literally just one pop of the shutter. They might be 8 seconds long, 15 seconds long max, but let me think. The ones
extra lighting in that.
not in that.
No,
No.
that's marvellous.
That was shot on a digital camera, so I was able to lift the shadows a bit, you know, and do those little tweaks. But there's certainly no. I mean, anybody shooting digital photos is generally using Photoshop to produce them, because that's the equivalent of a darkroom. But not Photoshop in the sense that it's been manipulated and tricked about with. No.
Marvellous.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thomas, yeah. Please.
Hi. Speaking about film cameras, what camera did you use and what particular film stock did you use for most of the photos?
Oh, technical.
Aye.
Right, it was a 4" by 5" negative that I used. The camera's a Sinar Norma. I don't know if that means anything to you. It was basically when I discovered that there was a potential to shoot on a large format negative. Because you've got to remember, like even in the most expensive digital camera, the sensor's probably that big. Whereas with film, you could go 8 by 10 is 8" by 10". But mine was 4 by 5. And I saw this American guy, a different American photographer to the one I mentioned originally, a guy called Michael Eastman, doing photographs of abandoned places around America with an 8 by 10 film camera, getting this 8 by 10 negative, effectively treating that 8 by 10 negative as a digital sensor by having the negative scanned at really high resolution. And as long as your technique in taking the picture is good, then the information captured within that negative is there to be extracted out, and by scanning it at high res, you can then create these really massive, very, very detailed images. So I didn't go down the 8 by 10 route, that was a step too far. I went 4 by 5, and because at the time, to do it digitally, I would have had to spend about £20,000 on a medium format digital camera. That was not an option. What I did was I got a large format film camera off eBay for 210 quid. And then I got another lens for 195 quid. And then I bought a bunch of books, old books, to learn how to use it. And then went out and tentatively set up and shot these images, sent them away to be developed. I got them back, I scanned the negatives on my own scanner and converted them to positive to see if they were any good. And the weird thing is, out of 10 negatives, I had 7 that were users. Like the hit rate, because it's about 10 quid a sheet now. It was costing me, I think, about £6 for a sheet of film. So before you click the shutter, you make sure you've set everything up right. So I had to send that away, get it developed, scan it. I think this is a goer. I then sent that negative away to be scanned professionally at high res, which cost 25 quid per image. The image came back on a memory stick, and each image was nearly a gigabyte in size. So I got the memory stick in the post, got home, put it in the computer, opened it up, and I thought, well, I'll just do a tiny little contrast change to it, that's all. Otherwise, it's just amazing as it is. And my computer went weird because it was crunching away trying to process this image. And I left it overnight. I thought it would be done in the morning, and I got up in the morning, went into that room where the computer was, and it had just all crashed and that. So I'd bought a 1960s film camera to shoot this piece of film, and I now had to buy a brand new computer to be able to do anything with it. And it was a great lesson, because I think what it showed to me is that, as fantastic as digital photography is, because it's just massively convenient, and there's a lot of things I can do with digitally that I wouldn't attempt to do with a film camera. But the same thing's true looking the other way around as well. If I today got a project in mind where I wanted to produce really big prints of gallery, you know, worthy of putting on the wall of a gallery. And I've got something in mind for that. The large format film camera will definitely be coming out again. It's so, you know, film's going to be with us for a good while. It's got, you know, it's like I always find myself equating quite a lot of things photography wise with because I have a track record of sorts in the music business. This with vinyl, yeah. It's like film's not dead, vinyl's not dead yet. But the thing is, I suppose some people might go the vinyl route because they feel it's trendy. I'm looking at the film not because it's a cool thing, I shoot film, but there are distinct advantages for particular purposes. It's got advantages over digital to me still. So like, yeah, use best of both worlds job.
Yeah, I'm trying to frame this question. I'm just going to stream of consciousness. I find these fascinating, particularly the interior shots. But I'm not a photographer, so I'm interested in your process. When I walk into a space like that, I'll be picking up the atmosphere and trying to imagine who lived there and, you know, whatever I can sense. But when you're going in there, are you actually thinking about how to frame it, how long the exposure? You're thinking in technical terms of how to, so you're approaching it from a completely different, more a technical point of view.
You do sort of take on some sort of vibe, whether it's of the past inhabit. Oh, totally, yeah. It's quite, sometimes quite a weird experience.
Some of them do have an eeriness to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sitting here obviously with these ones closest. I'm finding them endlessly fascinating.
But I'll take advantage of what you asked in terms of because I'm a big fan of architectural photography, which generally speaking is like, if you imagine people, a new building has been commissioned and it gets built and it's some proper designery job thing, and they'll get a photographer to go and photograph it, and they'll make sure that all the verticals are perfectly vertical, and it's a technical process to shoot something like that properly. And because I like that, I'm a big fan of that style of photography. I actually sort of, in my way, I've taken that and I've applied it to these interiors, which although they might like this thing, you know, a bit ramshackle, it's falling apart, but I've taken the time, the camera, I don't want to bore people with too much technical information, but setting things up and making sure that, I'll give you an example. Somebody asked me to critique their images of an old mining town in America that they'd gone to, because they'd seen my photographs and they told me that they'd been, and they said, be honest. So I looked at the images and it was clear to me that what they'd done is they wandered inside these old miners' huts, and they just put the camera up to their eye. They were clearly hadn't crouched down or anything like that or used a tripod, and just took the picture. So everything was from the viewpoint of them. So pretty much, because they were little small shed type things, they were looking down at things. And when you look down at things with a wide angle lens in particular, the vertical lines, assuming they in real life they're vertical, like the edges of the walls, they were doing this. And I'm probably a bit OCD about that. And as soon as I spot that in an architectural photo, that's all I can see. I can't see anything else in the picture. So all of these, if anybody can pick fault in it, you're welcome to have a go. But I've tried to, the camera is meticulously positioned so that none of that is going on. The camera's dead level. And I see that, and this in a way, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about treating these places with respect. I'm thinking, well, when the houses were originally built, the person who building it, presumably they'll have been using a spirit level or be doing something to make sure that's level and that's level. And I just thought, well, at least I can do is try and present it in the way that they tried to build it, if you like. Now, I'd imagine probably a lot of people, that's boring, you just want to see the image. But I do think that process does lend some sort of, like, it's almost like putting a kind of order into well, it's not chaos, but the decay, you know, it's trying to present it really, really neatly and precisely, if that makes sense.
That picture there, well, all of them, a lot of them anyway, look like they're paintings, or have that kind of feel. And paradoxically, the reason for that is because you've got the perspective lines dead right, which is what an artist would do.
Yeah, that's interesting because I haven't thought
Yeah,
about
because that's what I thought about that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the perspective lines of that are all tending to, you know, a vanishing point just beyond that church.
Yeah.
And similarly, this one here, and that's why I couldn't work it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's because I suppose if you had a blank sheet of paper and you were asked to draw a room, you're not going to draw the walls wonky angles or like when you're looking up at a building and people take pictures of looking up at a building, they tend to go like that. Well, I don't do that. So that's my attempt at trying to put that kind of. So I like that. Yeah.
Anyone else? We all questioned out. Okay, right. Well, we're out of time anyway. So say thank you to John.
Thank you. I'll say a quick thank you to the people, your volunteers that turned up this morning, because I didn't know there was a group. I was just standing talking to Jules and these people started appearing, and then there was about, what would it be, 10? A dozen? Yeah.
I forgot to count.
And then Jules says to me, will you just explain to these people something about the pictures? And I thought, well, I'm doing that tonight. And it turns out that, no, the reason for that is that they want to know about the pictures, because when I'm not going to be here after tomorrow, so when people are around, they'll have some information that they can pass on. And that I've done a few exhibitions now. I never had that happen before, so I was dead impressed with that. So thanks to all the volunteers.
We do rely mostly on volunteers, particularly hosting in the gallery and various other parts of the building, and so their enthusiasm and knowledge is very key to what we do.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Thank you for that, John.
Okay. Thank you.